articles. I want to say that, well, although some things look like they could be 100% not real, fake hoaxes out there, that it happens a lot, especially on these hate crimes. There's not so many of those. Some things do look that way, but however, the sentiment that the truth is stranger than fiction, that still rings true. That's what I'm seeing every single day. All right, so it's something to consider. That being said, the first article that we're going to go into is from out of the Miami New Times. Now, out of all the different various publications who have totally squandered their opportunities to tell the truth here on this particular Parkland situation, I would have to say that Miami New Times is probably some of the more accurate. All right, so with that being said, this is Bob Norman, and this article actually came out January 14th, a little bit over a month ago, 2019. All right, let's just go ahead and read it. Let's get down to the bottom of the nitty-gritty. If you haven't heard this before, it reads like this. Unlike 5 other members of the Broward Sheriff's Office command staff, Colonel Frank Adderly remained at the agency over the weekend after Governor Ron DeSantis ousted his boss, Scott Israel, as sheriff. And some of y'all might remember that. DeSantis, he got up in office, and it took a little while, but guess what? He got rid of Israel, just like he was talking about doing, just like his whole constituency was begging him to do. So he went ahead and he did that. Adderly, at times controversial, former police chief of Fort Lauderdale. Now, it's going to be a key word right there, Fort Lauderdale. He tried his fate with new Sheriff Gregory Toney, who was appointed by DeSantis after the governor suspended Israel for incompetence and neglect of duty in his handling of the mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Now, I believe that was very articulately put, all right? That was accurate in what they're saying. Incompetence, neglect of duty, quite apparently, all right? So, to go further, on Monday, Adderly was summarily fired. It was the first of what is expected to be several dismissals, and please believe there was a lot of dismissals. It's hard to keep up with all of them, all right? So it was the first of what is expected to be several dismissals by Toney as he sweeps out many law enforcement friends and political cronies whom Israel hired after his 2012 election. Adderly, he follows Under Sheriff Steve Kinsey, and you've seen a lot of these people's faces. Steve Kinsey, Colonel Jack Dale, Colonel Jim Poland. I know you've seen these people. Major Kevin Schultz. And you might not have seen him, but we're going to talk about him extensively. Major Chadwick Wagner, out the door. All but Wagner were members of what became known as the Fort Lauderdale crew. That's going to be extremely important to remember. The Fort Lauderdale crew, Fort Lauderdale Police Department officers hired by Israel to fill his command staff at the larger agency. Okay. There's some controversy around that whole election, by the way, but don't even worry about it. Israel retired from FLPD in 2014 after 25 years there. That's a long time, all right? Mind you might know that is the entirety of the 90s, all throughout the 90s. Fort Lauderdale, all right? Let's continue. The firings mark an ignominious end to the career of Adderly, who became one of South Florida's best known lawmen, in part due to unwanted headlines, which you may or may not remember. Maybe you're not from South Florida, all right? Unwanted headlines, okay. He began working for FLPD in 1980, okay. Fort Lauderdale, is that ringing any sort of bells all throughout the 80s and 90s? All right, so he began working for Fort Lauderdale Police Department in 1980 and was made the department's first black police chief in 2008. Not throwing shade towards him on that. All right, so in July 2008, shortly after his appointment, his wife, Eleanor Adderly, well, she fired a shot at him with his with his own service gun in their plantation home. All right, that might have been a problem. Might have been a problem there. It struck the bed where he was lying. She would serve jail time for the incident. All right, the following year, one of Adderley's friends, if that wasn't bad enough, his own wife shooting at him with his own gun. All right. The following year, one of Adderley's friends, attorney Scott Rothstein, fled the country for Morocco after his $1 billion Ponzi scheme imploded. All right, $1 billion with a B scheme exploded. Adderley faced great criticism for allowing Fort Lauderdale police officers to provide personal security details for Rothstein while he was pulling off one of South Florida's, quote, greatest crimes in their history. All right, Mr. Scott Rothstein, $1 billion Ponzi scheme, right? Fleeing to Morocco and stuff like this. Real bad. Real bad news. Adderley also accepted a ride on Rothstein's private jet to New York for a Dolphins-Jets football game, and he dined regularly at Rothstein's Fort Lauderdale restaurant, Bova Prime. All right, I guess that's just some of the perks. Maybe he got some good friends. He failed to report gifts from Rothstein as required by law. Okay, and also mysteriously showed up at a crash scene involving a close associate of Rothstein who probably was gone off all sort of drugs. It's Fort Lauderdale. Anyways, but Adderley, he was cleared of criminal misconduct in the investigation, and despite the controversy, he retained his position as police chief, believe it or not. It wasn't until 2016, after Israel won his second term. All right, you might understand it could have been some sort of voter fraud. All right, it wasn't until 2016, after Israel won his second term as sheriff, that Adderley left his job at Fort Lauderdale chief to join BSO as a colonel in charge of the community affairs. Fired with Adderley today was Kim Andor, the assistant of former Colonel Steve Kinsey. All right, there's a lot of people, trust me, a lot of people got fired. A historical side note, Gregory Tony, the first black sheriff in Broward history, fired a man who had been the first black police chief in Fort Lauderdale history. It's like, dude, why is there a first black everything for everything in the world? Why is that? But unlike much of Adderley's career, the firing wasn't controversial. It came as expected. All right, it would have been a shocker had it not come. Basically, I don't even know why he stayed. Maybe he thought, hey, we're both some black guys. Maybe he's not gonna totally fire me, and then he got totally fired. All right, so that was just a little taste. It introduced you to something that's called the Fort Lauderdale Crew, which was very well known about. That's the end of that particular article. Okay, but that gives you a taste. Now we're going to dive into the second article. And this one, actually, let's go ahead and I want to see this. Oh, man, this is the wrong one. This one's about Melly Mel.